We're inside the GSN newsroom today with Mike Maslowski, the Chief Operating Officer of Sabre Gold Mines, which trades on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol SGLD. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. I'd like to start out by asking you to give me a bit of a bird's eye view of Sabre Gold Mines. What assets do you have, and what are your short-term and medium-term business objectives with those assets?
Sure. We have two main assets. One is the Copperstone mine, which is in western Arizona. It's a former producer. And we also have the Brewery Creek property up in the Yukon territory, which is also a former producer. My short-term goal is to get the Copperstone mine back and running, followed by the Brewery Creek mine.
Let's back up a little bit. I'd like to tell me a little bit about yourself, about your history, both in the mining industry and also with, I understand you were basically running Brewery Creek almost a decade ago.
By education, I'm a geological engineer from the Colorado School of Mines. Spent most of my career in the resource business. Started out sitting drill rigs as a geologist, logging chips. Worked for a company called Pegasus Gold in the 90s, where I actually discovered a little gold mine called Diamond Hill in Montana. It was an underground skarn gold deposit that I discovered and brought into production for Pegasus. And then I moved on from there and became a chief geologist and technical services manager for the Galena mine, which is in northern Idaho. It's the big silver district up there. It's produced over 1 billion ounces of silver. When I left Coeur, I came on board. That was about 2010, 2011, and went on board with Golden Predator. Bill Sheriff brought me on and spent a long time bringing advancing the Brewery Creek, taking it from kind of a, junior exploration to get it ready to go to mining.
So Golden Predator is basically a predecessor company of Sabre Gold Mines. That's correct.
The Golden Predator merged with Arizona Gold last year to become Sabre Gold.
Well, I've recently been talking with Sid Tolbert, the general manager at the Copperstone. So I'd like to focus today mostly on Brewery Creek, partly because you've just had news out and also because of your prior association with Brewery Creek. So give me a bit of an overview from your perspective of this project.
Brewery Creek was discovered in the late 80s, early 90s by Noranda, and then it went into production in the mid 1990s as an open pit heap leach, first heap leach in the Arctic. And they focused in one area that became known as the reserve trend. And along that reserve trend, it's about 9 kilometers in strike length. They ended up mining 7 little open pits along that trend. And then in the late 90s, price of gold was cratering and they had a few other operational issues, so they shut down. But they also had 2 additional deposits on the east end of the trend and 2 additional deposits on the western end of the trend that they never touched. So everybody's focus has been there. And so when Golden Predator back in 2011 came in, of course, we drilled those other 4 deposits more. We actually drilled where they were mining and found that there is still more oxide mineralization left. And then we started to expand out to the south where there's great geophysical anomalies. Noranda did some drilling, and there's a zone out to the south there that could be, if you will, the real deposit at Brewery Creek. It's a big intrusive center. It's a different rock type than in the reserve trend. A lot of holes have been drilled. There's an inferred resource out there. Just a sub-gram resource, but leaches really well and leaches well to depths 200 meters deep, and it still leaches really well. But again, Golden Predator also was focused on the reserve trend, so we never advanced the southern area as much as we could have. So hopefully Sabre Gold now, what our plan is we're going into permit those 4 additional deposits to mine those, remine the old deposits or finish mining them, if you will. And then as that starts to come into fruition, then we'll continue to expand the resources out to the south.
So the holy grail would be to get into production, let the mine spit out some cash, use some of that cash to
Self-fund
further
the
develop.
exploration, exactly,
Yeah,
organic exploration on the property. And
yeah,
from a geologic sense, it's an intriguing target to the south because it's a typical intrusive. If people understand the Yukon, there's Victoria Gold, and then up in Alaska, there's Fort Knox. That's a whole series of intrusive centers that have similar mineralization, and Brewery Creek is right
yeah.
along that.
Brewery Creek was in production in the 90s, so presumably it was fully permitted at that time. Where are you at with permits now? I know these permits don't just hang around for decades. They need to be refreshed, renewed, reapplied. How does that process work?
So Brewery Creek was fully permitted, and it had permitted 7 of the pits that the Viceroy was the previous operator that they had mined in the 90s. So those 7 pits were permitted. The 4 pits I talked about, the 2 out to the west and the 2 out to the east, were never included in the original permit boundaries, although Viceroy, when they closed down, was starting to work on the amendment process. Anyways, long story short, the permits were valid until December 31st, 2021. And so Golden Predator had attempted to renew those permits with the government, and there was confusion and all sorts of different things going on. So what Sabre says, okay, let's just let those permits expire.
Yeah,
And then we can widen the horizons, include these 4 other deposits into it, make a much bigger mine footprint, if you will. And that's where we are now. That we have notified in the Yukon, your first step is to go through environmental assessment with the Yukon Socioeconomic Board.
right.
We will be submitting our what's called the project description to them here on June 15th. We'll be submitting that to them, and that'll start the permit process.
Social environmental body is sort of the first stop. The government wants you to kind of get good with them first.
Correct. Like in the United
Yeah.
States, you might call it an environmental assessment or the higher level in environmental impact statement. So that's what YESUB is, Yukon Economic Socioeconomic Assessment Board. So we go to them and they will assess the property from all of those aspects. They will eventually deliver a decision to us saying this is, yes, we recommend that the property proceed along these guidelines. Then once we receive that decision document, then we go to Energy Mines and Resources and apply for a quartz mining license and to the Water Board for a water use license. But those 2 licenses come pretty quickly.
Mike, I've been looking at the PEA for Brewery Creek. There's a lot of very robust numbers in there in terms of the MPV, the amount of cash it will spit out, how quickly the investors will be paid back. Can you tell me a bit from your perspective about what you've learned from this PEA?
You bet. The PEA does show really robust economics for the project. And again, it's just based on mining the deposits along what I talked about, the reserve trend, the existing 6, 7 old pits plus the 4 new ones, and doesn't even include the exploration potential, which is out to the south.
Right.
The PEA is based on mining about 18 million tons of oxide mineralization. The head grades are well over a gram, average about 1.2 grams per ton, which is pretty high for an open pit these days. So we'll mine that it's mining that right now at $1,700 gold. The mine pays back in 2.6 years. You know, it's actually fairly low capital. We're in like $105 million for initial capital. And that's because, you know, Viceroy, there's a lot of existing infrastructure still on the property. The access road off of what's called the Dempster Highway into the property is, I mean, you can drive, you know, big semi trucks in it right now. So that's all done. There's a network of haul roads on the property that still exist. The solution ponds that Viceroy used is still there. The heap leach pad is still there. So that all that infrastructure makes us get in with a lot lower capital.
So just to review, if I lent you $105 million today to build this mine, but assuming it was permitted, which it isn't yet, how long would it take for you to pay me back from the first day of production?
Right now, we estimate 2.6 years at $1,700 gold.
Right. So that's a big de-risker for a financier of this mine.
That is correct.
It seems like the permitting is probably the primary hurdle that needs to be got over to get this into production? Because I don't think it's going to be that hard to find someone to lend you the CapEx. What is the timeline for that blue sky if things go well?
It could go as quickly as 2 years, and it could take as long as 4 years. But that would be my window, 2 to 4 years.
All right. Thanks again very much. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Guy, and nice meeting you.
Likewise.